I'm going to speed run chapters 5 and 6 and what I learned and gained from them. Chapter 5 was all about emotions, attitudes, and stress. It talked about the differences between effects, emotions, and moods. It talked about how effects were how we respond to moods and emotions being intense feelings about specific things, and then moods being longer, less intense feelings about more generalized things. It talked about emotional contagion, which is how emotions in the workplace can spread to other people, and then talked about emotional labor, which is managing your feelings to present positive emotions, how emotional labor can involve surface acting and deep acting, surface acting being just suppressing your emotions to present positive ones, and then deep acting being actually trying to change those emotions, basically fake it till you make it. It talked about emotional dissonance and regulations. Regulations can be antecedent focused or response focused. Those antecedent focused being before the emotions fully occur, including situation selection or situation modification, attention deployment, or cognitive change. And the response focused being after the entirety of the emotional response has occurred, being reappraisal or suppression. It talked about emotional intelligence, which is basically understanding your own or others' emotions to better manage behaviors in relationships. And then the 4 dimensions of emotional intelligence being self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. It talks about attitudes and behaviors, attitudes being the tendency to consistently respond positively or negatively to people. It talked about how the 3 elements of that are cognitive appraisal, affect evaluation, and behavioral intention. And then it talks about cognitive dissonance, which is stress due to inconsistency among beliefs, attitudes, and values and behaviors. It talked about workplace attitudes and how those are critical for job satisfaction, employee engagement, and organizational commitment. It talked about how there's differences between organizational, effective, continuance, and normative commitment. And then it talked about stress versus strain, how not all stress is bad, including the eustress, which is not bad, but the de-stress actually is bad. It talked about coping with stress involving problem-focused, or emotional focus. And then it gave a big overview of outcomes of a successful employee well-being program. And then chapter 6 began talking about concepts and theoretical perspectives and motivation, which is basically your driving factors, and then how motivation is based on how your behavior is energized, directed, and maintained. It talked about the different needs theories, content or process, basically content being what are the different types of factors that drive you, and then process being how our needs drive, influence, and sustain our behavior. It gave examples of the content needs, which were Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Herzberg's 2 theory needs, the Erg theory, and the McClelland requires needs theory. And then it talked about money as a motivator, but really money's not the best motivator. I talked about the goal setting theory and SMART goals, which are specific, meaningful, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. Basically a good way of setting goals to make sure you actually get through to them. And then it talked about behavioral, which are short-term goals, and then performance, which are longer-term goals. And then it talks about the equity theory, which was one of a process needs theory, and it talked about organizational justice, which is what people deem fair in the workplace. It talked about distributive, procedural, interpersonal, and informational justice within organizational justice. And then it concluded by talking about the expectancy theory, which is basically saying that your motivation is a sum of expectancy, instrumentality, and balance.